Welcome back to the Daily Edge. We have had several weeks off. We took the summer off. Thank you for allowing us that time. We spent a lot of time with friends and family, but we are back at it. Glad to be here. My brothers TJ and Todd. And so today we're going to jump off right around the corner. We have another one of TJ's races coming up, Prairie on Fire. So this is a big race. A lot of people are coming. There's a lot of logistics. And so we thought we would jump back in, talking about one of the things we talked about a lot, which is racing, and talk about Prairie on Fire.
Sweet. So the cool thing about this is that I'm joined with somebody who ran it last year and somebody who's never run it. But what we'll do is we'll kind of start talking about this backyard ultra concept. We'll talk a little bit about why we have taken this type of race and established it where we have from a race production perspective and how that kind of aligns with our company values. So the backyard ultra, what makes it unique is and I guess what aligns it with what we do is that it's very accessible for people. So normally when you sign up for a race, you have a specific distance that you need to go, right? If it's a 5K, it's 3.11 miles. It's a half marathon, it's 13.1, so on and so forth. The backyard ultra concept, I became aware of it in probably 2015, 2014. It was developed by a guy by the name of Gary Cantrell, who goes by Lazarus Lake of the Barkley Marathons fame. If anybody's familiar with that, that's one of the most popular ultra running films. That's the hardest, essentially, foot race in the world from a difficulty to distance perspective. But anyways, this concept was developed by him. The way it works is fairly simple. You start at the top of an hour, pick an hour. Let's call it 8 a.m. And you have 1 hour from the top of the hour to complete 4.167 miles. It seems like a really unique number. And the reason he chose that number was because if you do that distance 24 times, it equals exactly 100 miles. If you're able to finish that 4.167 miles, which I believe is roughly 14:33 per mile. So any of you familiar with movement know that you could speed walk a 14:33 mile. I mean, people can speed walk 6-minute miles, but a normal human can speed walk a mile roughly that fast. If you're able to do it within that time frame, so if you get to that end by 8:59:59, you can go again at the top of the next hour. And it's a last person standing race. The official rules say that the race is over when only one person goes out on the final yard. If, let's say, you go 20 hours and one person is left standing and they don't make it back within that hour, then no one wins the race. Again, technically, if you don't finish, it's a do not finish. So if you don't win, it's a do not finish. We kind of massage that a little bit because that's kind of a rough way after you've put so much out there. But again, what makes that concept cool is if you are in a scenario where you're between distances, where you want to run a half marathon, but you're not quite there yet, you can show up and run 2 yards. Similarly, our other race, the Full Mo, we call it kind of an introduction to ultra. It's the next distance in line when it comes to distance progression after 26.2. It's paved, it's slightly downhill, so it's something that's digestible for somebody who's done a marathon and maybe not an ultra, and this kind of aligns with that. If you want to do any of these distances, typically where we see the most drop off is after that 50K because a lot of people use this as their first ultra, but it's been a pretty spectacular thing to watch grow. We've gotten very lucky. We are able to host this now, and this will be our 3rd year at this location at the White River Campground in Cicero, Indiana, which is really awesome because as you might assume, it is something that requires a centralized location where you can set up for a considerable period of time. And to have a campground there with a beautiful prairie and trail system to the east and a paved trail to the west, it couldn't be better. I'll start there.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. So that's one of the unique things about the race. There is a home base. I mean, you do have some races that start and finish right at the same time, but this is a little bit unique in that you're running these loops continuously, and in your typical ultra marathons, let's talk about the full mo. It's a point to point, or you're going out and you're not coming back until you're finishing, right? If you're talking about a very long, but you're coming back to the same point, every 4.167 miles. Talk about some of the challenges with that, as well as some of the things that people have really enjoyed about that setup.
I guess starting with the challenges logistically is you have to fit a considerable amount of people in a small space. I would encourage anybody listening to our podcast, if you want to show your, if you want to expose your children or friends and family to people doing really hard things, this is a great place to do it. What that does though is at a typical race, you'll have people spread out across 26 miles or 3 miles cheering for their people. It's not necessarily great. I mean, last night's a great example. I went to watch my daughter run a 3K, and I had to run a 5:30 half mile to watch, the two parts of her races. And anybody who's watched a marathon or a half marathon knows you are scrambling to get to see your person twice. So a benefit of it is you get to see your person every hour. Another benefit of it is you get to know the people that are supporting the people that you're running with. And then this just community develops and grows. But back to my original point, from a logistics challenge perspective, is we're talking about fitting 300 to 400 people in a very tight area because people tend to linger because you get to see people more often. And, the unique thing about the race is you can address problems as they arise. If something happens at mile 15 in the marathon, if it's a chafing issue, if you're behind on fuel, if miss a water cup, here, you have the ability to problem solve every hour, and you can, a lot of times you're moving slow enough that you can fix your hydration issues, or you can fix your issues from a sustenance standpoint, right? Getting food in. So I think, from a negative perspective for us, it's just tough logistically to fit that many people in there, parking and things like that. But beneficially, the community that develops, of course, the runners are getting they're meeting each other out there. You're moving slow enough that you're having a new conversation every yard, and then everybody's getting to know each other. And as the race unfolds, you start to see other crews help other runners. Hey, my runner forgot this. Oh, I've got this. Hey, my runner forgot this. Oh, I've got this. Or sharing other types of insights. If somebody has done this before and gone longer, hey, here's one of the things we saw that was cool last year was, even from and we'll talk a little bit about the documentary, but from a filming perspective, our film producer's drone died, and we had somebody there that was like, oh yeah, I just got one in the car, or 2 people. So it's really a lot of fun. It's really a great opportunity to expose anybody or to motivate yourself to go out and do hard things because it's got such an interesting entry point.
Well, you said motivate anybody, and I think that's an important point about this. This is a very different race. You mentioned in order to hit the timeline and be back at the start line in time, you have to run a 14-minute and 33-second mile. So that's doable, right,
Yep.
for a broad range of people. And talk about that a little bit, just how much that brings in a much, at least in my experience, a much broader audience in terms of, and then maybe talk a little bit about the different strategies that people employ in this race, because they're all over the map.
Yeah, they are. And it is really cool. It has, as we've grown over the years, this race started in a really unique position. We decided we wanted to do something like this. I think this was the one race that I really myself pushed pretty hard for. And the first year we did it, we were not able to do it at the location that we're currently doing it at because we really need to prove concept to Hamilton County Parks, who's our partner in this endeavor. And so they have one park that's open 24 hours. It's the Morris Beach Reservoir Park. So the first year we did it there, it was a situation, I tell this story a lot, where we had 7 people sign up, and I called the MTC guys and I'm like, hey guys, I need you to come up and run a yard so this feels like a legitimate race. I think we had 21 in total. 14 of those were MTC people that I called last minute and let in for free. And then we had 7 people sign up.
Just to clarify really quickly on terminology, I don't know that you covered this. So the 4.167 miles is also called a yard. So if you hear us say yards, that's equivalent to basically one loop or 4.167 miles.
Good point. And sometimes we'll say laps too, but yes, great point. So from that point, we grew. We've kind of grown into a a larger race. The next year we had, I think 50 and I think 70 ended up racing. The year after that, we limited it to 100. I think we had 120 show up. This year, we sold out 7 months in advance. So what's happened from a runner perspective is that it's getting a little bit more elite on the top end, but you'll still see people that do show up for a yard or 2 yards or 3 yards and like are really pushing for those goals. We have some other concepts we're looking at introducing as this race does become more top heavy, and we feel like, we had the opportunity to go further. Last year was the first time we had ever broken the 100-mile barrier. The first 3 years, the farthest anybody had gone was in the 80s, which I think was Cameron in 2023. Last year we had 11 people break 100 miles. But so from a racer's perspective, you're going to see this year's a great example. We have collegiate, like Division I collegiate runners coming to this race. It doesn't necessarily lend itself, as you kind of mentioned, to their skill set, and we'll talk about that in a second in terms of different approaches. And we also have people that, like a 12-minute mile is hammering for them, which is really cool because they can still get it done. When it comes to different approaches to the race itself, we've seen a lot over the years, and we've seen people have success in both approaches. There seems to be a standard approach for like what you would call your professional backyard ultra runners, and these people running for considerable amounts of time. But an example in 2023 when Cameron run and Gracie's back this year, we're super stoked to have her. Congrats to her. They had a baby. So she had to take last year off. This year she's back in action. But Gracie, 2 years ago, I would say ran almost every yard under 9-minute pace, and it worked for her. Angela Kumar last year, same thing, especially towards the end, was hammering it on the way in, as she was getting close to the end of her experience. Whereas other people, you did this last year, at part of it, will do a run walk. I ran with one of the we'll be doing a documentary again this year, and one of the ladies that will be featured in that, as will the other two I just mentioned, Tammy, has spent a lot of time out at Prairie, and she has very specific landmarks throughout that course where we walk from here to here. Okay, we walk from here to here. One of the cool things that happened last year as it relates to people getting to know each other, one of the guys from the Tribal Training Do Hard Things group started walking backwards and was telling everybody, you want to switch up the muscles that you're engaging. So let's try this. And I've had at least a dozen people tell me that story that weren't part of that group. Hey, yeah, we started walking the hill to the Blue Bridge backwards. And that helped. So from an approach perspective, you're seeing walk runs, you're seeing people running it faster. The one thing that I think people might try to do and shift from is cutting it close. I think you want, and you can speak to this, I think you want time to have a little bit of time to kind of establish and process through a routine. I think the mental stress that comes with showing up 58 minutes when it's 60 can be a little bit difficult. I know people have this idea that stringing it closer together so it feels like a long run might be beneficial, but I think there's some stress there. So maybe I can kind of kick that back to you, having run it last year. What did you find worked well for you? And, you had quite a while to explore a bunch of different approaches. Like, where did you kind of land?
Yeah, this was interesting. It was challenging because this race is largely mental. It's not as much, you mentioned it not being for the D1 athletes necessarily, because you don't get any sort of real benefit other than you get some more rest time in between if you go out and you're hammering a 7-minute mile.
Yeah.
So for me, when it gets into the mental aspect of how long you can last, part of that was staying in community. That like keeps you mentally engaged and keeps you going. And so for me, a lot of the first part of it was running with other people. So I was actually not determining the pace right out of the gate. I was with some people who finished in the 52, 53 minute range quite a bit. And I did find that as that compounded, that was not enough time for me. And so, my strategy last year was actually I had quite a bit of variability. I did that for several loops. I had one around 100K where I went out and ran super fast. Well, at that point, it felt super fast. It was about an 8:30 mile. And then I came back and I had time to shower and change clothes, and that was good. So I think what's interesting is it's not so much that on any given yard, you have to come back with a certain amount of time, but you at least have to plan every few yards. You need to have some room in there. So if you come back at 58 minutes on one yard, that's not necessarily the end of the world. But if you're doing that 2, 3, 4 times in a row, or even 55, 56 minutes, I think that's where the stress starts to compound. So for me, it worked out. I did that 52, 53. Sometimes I had a couple where I just kind of came in a little earlier, 46 to 48. I mentioned the one. I had some I cut a little bit closer just based on who I was with and what they were doing. Because again, a lot of this is just trying to figure out how to mentally last. And that is different than the fitness and I guess the fitness side of it.
Okay.
So let's say you're in the middle. I haven't run the race, so I'm going to ask a bunch of new questions. The first one is like, you get back, let's say you got to go change your shorts, and that they miss the hour by 30 seconds. Like that's it. They're toast. Like how difficult and how much do you toe a line like that?
It really is hard. Laz is very black and white with the rules. I think the very first year we did it, we missed a couple of rules. And it's tough too because Katiwi, Laz does his at his house in Tennessee. I've walked that course and I cannot believe people do backyard ultras on that course. I guess let me answer give a quick point of clarity for the rest of this, and then I'll go back into answering that question as I think about the course. So the traditional course format for the backyard ultra is a day course and a night course. A lot of people now, as these have grown across the country, just have one course that you stay on the whole time. Laz's course is a little bit too technical to do at night, and people were tripping and hurting themselves. So he has a night course where they're out on a road by his house and out and back. We have done the same thing. Again, as I alluded to earlier, originally we were not allowed to be in that park at night. In the year after the first one, they actually paved a trail along a road that is right outside the front of the campground that we talked about. So we do have a day and a night course. I want to mention that because that may come up later. But when it comes to rules, there are a couple really hard and fast rules. First and foremost is there is no aid on the course unless it's official. So our particular course runs through 2 parking lots. So technically speaking, if that wasn't laid out clearly, people could have crew, right? Or cars. Like if you parked in a particular lot, you could engage. So there's on the course itself, there's no aid unless we have an official aid station, which we don't. I had a guy one year ask if he could stash water. I was a little confused because it's 4 miles. But again, that I think speaks to the type of runners where, somebody who is looking to stash water along a 4-mile loop, maybe a beginner, which is cool. We love that. But you're not allowed to do that. So no on-course crew, no on-course aid. That's important to understand. Secondly, the only reason you can leave the course is for the restroom, period. Luckily for us, we have 3 restrooms on the loop itself. So you run right by one as you start and finish. I think there are 3 stalls in each side. So there's restrooms there. There's one that's a little after 2 miles, and then there's one that's a little after 3 miles. So you have those opportunities. And again, we're in a prairie, so people will take advantage of the natural surroundings as well. Only reason you can leave. Laz tells a story. So he does 2 of these now. Big's Backyard Ultra is the original. It is now the either global team championships or global singles championships. So it's impossible to get into. He has another one called Littles. And last year at Littles, what happened was they do bibs. We do not. We know who everybody is. We get names. We do bracelets. And then when you are done, we take the bracelet. However, they do bibs. And he had a runner last year who was in the corral, and it was 30 seconds to go, and the guy forgot his bib, and he's like, I'll be right back. And Laz is like, don't leave. And the guy missed it by 4 seconds. He was DNF. So, it's like anything. You have to draw a line somewhere. There were a couple times a year or 2 years ago where, again, we were a little bit relaxed, where like I remember somebody leaving the corral and needing a Band-Aid. And so we let a crew run and hand them a Band-Aid, like because they were blistering on the back of their heel or something. I remember we had a scenario where somebody was helping somebody put on their vest for the night yard. So the first night yard. By the rules, it's really not allowed. And I think that those in specific lend to a unique element of this, which is that you have to be mentally acute. If you forget something, you're stuck without it for an hour. And I believe that's fair, because that can make a major difference. If you're somebody and you're just not aware, or you're pushing it and you forget body glide and you're chafing for an extra hour, that can mean the difference between winning and losing this race or going far in this race. And so while we do want people to push, we want to make sure it's an even playing field.
Wow. What would you say? So you ran it last year, you did 100 miles. Mm-hmm. What were some of the biggest challenges that you ran into throughout the race?
I would say fueling is probably one of the toughest for a race like this. While you do come back to the same spot and you have food there, there's a point where you're burning roughly 500 calories an hour. And to try and refuel 500 calories an hour, that's a decent chunk of calories.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of gummy bears.
Yeah, you don't want to be doing all gels. And so you're eating, I feel like a Jimmy John's sub, like a Slim One is roughly 500 and some calories. So think
every
about
lap.
that. Every single lap, every single hour, like the equivalent of that. And so I naturally have a few food sensitivities, so I've got a little more limitation there. But trying to eat super, super clean and your body be at a place where it can continue to digest, because 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, but after like 15 hours or even 12 hours, your stomach is done. It's done. And so I would say fueling, staying fueled. I went heavy on fruit towards the end, and that helped a lot. So you find things that work, and if I ever do it again, or when I do it again at some point, I'll have a little more information. But it takes time to experiment and learn this. It's not something that you come out generally, unless you've done this sort of thing before. You don't come out and just nail it in year one. You can practice as much as you can. I would say from a challenge perspective, that's at the top of the list. It's obvious, just the exhaustion from a muscular perspective, from a skeletal perspective, the joints and the bones at certain points really, it hurts. It hurts pretty bad.
So food, you can't just rely on snacks. If you're going for a long period of time, you're going to have to figure out a way to actually eat regular meals, and then trying to digest that while you're running and working out. What about
that's where the walk run can come into play. A lot of guys do this. They'll eat, if they get in at 45, 50 minutes, you can eat, and then you can walk the first mile. It gets very specific. The attention to detail, as TJ mentioned, having a very acute mind. It's not just the 15 minutes that you're there, but being very intentional and specific about how you move around the track and letting food digest and all of that.
Different times of day that you preferred over others, night versus the day running, like what?
Yeah, I preferred the day loop. And I personally, some may know this, I would prefer kind of the heat. The night that we did it, it was like 40 to 45 degrees.
Yeah, 45.
And at that point, your body doesn't really have a whole lot of capability to keep itself warm. After 15 hours of running, your regulation is not what it is. So a lot of chills and those sorts of things late at night, and getting the apparel and making sure you were dressed appropriately but not overdressing. There was just more complexity to that for me.
Going back to food real quick, do you guys offer any food there? Does everyone have to bring their own food? Kind of talk me through that.
Yes, food for us is a staple. So year one at the campground, and we'll talk kind of through our entire food offering. So one of MTC's biggest I mean, one of our, founding members and like a huge part of this race is John Faust. We've talked about John a lot on this podcast. So year one, John actually brought a smoker out and started smoking pork butts. And that was like a huge thing. As the runners are coming in, they're smelling this. It was still a fairly small race, and it kind of became a staple. Like, hey, if you make it here, you're going to get to eat this. So that's always available as the evening comes. We start this race at 8 a.m., so we're up early. He starts the smokers. This year, he'll be bringing in his 700-pound, quarter-inch steel monster. And so we'll be doing a lot of that. Last year, we partnered with Chaos Crewing. So Britt and that crew, Chaos Crewing is an organization that really comes and crews ultra runners across the country. They do some really, really awesome things. So if there's an ultra runner who's participating in a big race, or if somebody's doing, attempting a big FKT, which is a fastest known time on a long trail that takes a month or two, a lot of times they'll show up. They have a lot of experience crewing. They have a lot of experience working aid stations. So, somebody, again, if they're very competitive or they don't have a crew member and they need somebody to get a hold of Chaos Crewing, and then they show up and help those people succeed in their race. So we partnered with them last year. So the morning of Saturday morning and Sunday morning, they were doing pancakes and other breakfast foods. We also have coffee. This year, she has signed up for her own 100 that weekend. So they won't be there, but we will be doing breakfast. So we will have pancakes, sausage, bacon, some other breakfast foods. John has done an entire menu this year. So we have not only breakfast, we have dinner, we will have food throughout the day. So one of the things that we noticed last year, at least from a crew and family perspective, is people have to leave. You can't stay somewhere for 20 hours with kids and not have food. So they would be going to local. This year we'll have food available for purchase, hamburgers, hot dogs, things that are maybe a little bit, friendly for people with food restrictions. So we may have one or two options there. So that'll be available for purchase throughout the day for a reasonable price. And then the night before, we've partnered with, so John is a partner at King Dough, and they're a local phenomenal pizza restaurant. They will be providing pizzas the night before. So we're expecting to have over 100 people the night before during setup. So you prep for this race the night before. People will come set up their canopies in their camps so that they're ready first thing in the morning, because you do have to park outside and off-site. Logistically, it can be a scramble to get in there in the morning and set up. But we'll have pizza for well over 100 people the night before. So in terms of food, we've got a lot. We have a couple sponsors day of that. It's more race fuel specific. So Pickle Juice is a new one. It's an electrolyte shot. So we'll have those available on site. We typically have Tailwind. We'll probably work with Untapped, who is another fuel company. They're kind of centered around maple syrup. So we always have a handful of goo gels and things like that. So we'll have Element there this year. There'll be another electrolyte supplement that we'll have. So quite a few different options for fueling, although, and I put it in every email, like Todd said, we do recommend you figure out what works for you, because stomach fatigue is real. It's just like any other muscle in your body. There will come a point where it's a wrap, and you better figure out what works for you, because if you're mentally tough and you have a little bit of fitness, your stomach will take you. That's, I just had a buddy who ran the Leadville 100 this past weekend. He was in 16th place in one of the most competitive hundreds in the country, about 50 miles in, and his stomach turned and he had to walk it in from 100K. And it was all stomach. So that's how important it is to understand and establish your fueling strategy. But we do have tons of food.
Sounds incredible. I think I'll be the first guy to actually gain weight. Just eat a Faust pulled pork sandwich every single hour.
There you go.
So most of that food's for purchase.
The food for lunch is purchased. The pork is for the runners, typically, or the meats are for the runners at night, and then the food in the morning.
The pizzas
is free for runners. That's a prepaid, right? Okay. So it was an add-on. So runners and families have prepaid for that the night before.
Do most people set up campsites? Like, does everyone have a tent, and they all, is that how it works, or are there some people that just show up the morning of, no tent, and just a couple backpacks and a buddy? Or
about 70% of people do tents or canopies.
Okay.
Some people need them, some people don't, but it's nice to have everything in one place. The way that the race is configured is that we have a team element to this too, and we could talk about that in a little bit. I think this year we have 6 or 7 teams. So this location, there is a pavilion that sits in the middle and then is surrounded by green space. And then on the right hand, there's a road on the east side. And then on the east side of that, there are campgrounds. And the campgrounds are where the teams are focused and condensed. For us to fit the number of people on this plot of property that we have to have the people that are on teams on these camping pads.
It's like a team campsite, so you can put more people in. And
correct. So the tribal training guys, they are a major part of this, and they're normally 30 to 40 deep. So they have the southernmost campground because it extends close to the start of the race, and so they can put 30 or 40 people there. They can put 15 canopies there and fit everybody in. The only exception to the rule from a team's perspective is if you were one of the top 3 finishers, male, female, year prior, and then this year we're doing anybody who is coming back and run over 100 miles, you get your pick of where you are. So those people that are kind of showing up to work, they want their own campsites, understandable. And we could talk a little bit about the corral itself, but the corral is this road that I've described to the east of this space, and they'll typically pick campsites along that corral so they can get in and out quickly.
What has been your visibility to, I mean, obviously you're trying to keep yourself as fresh as possible. You see people out there getting massages. You see people out there with their massage guns. Like, what have you seen people have the most success with just trying to maintain the muscular endurance?
Well, this year it's going to be interesting because this year we have not only 2 physical therapists that are going to be on site, we have 2 physical therapists running. So Louie and John are running, and then we have Tyler, and the other name's escaping me, but they're showing up. So we'll have 4 physical therapists on site to help people. But I do think that rolling, we just see a lot of rolling. We see a lot of massage guns. We see a little bit of stretching here. Those are the major things that I think people are doing, trying to in terms of the yards themselves, trying to vary pace, like you said, doing the walk run seems to help a lot. I know that, Kaylin last year, my daughter ran the first 4 yards of her experience. And then when she shifted with you and started doing some walking and running, doing that back, but just doing the backwards walking, finding those different spots. So you're working different muscles. You see people do things like use icy hot and those things. So, not as much as you do see the other things, but I think, and you could maybe speak to this, you probably hit a point, I would say at the, 50-mile range where it doesn't get much worse. It's not muscularly and skeletally, it doesn't get much worse. It becomes, for some people, it's a heart exhaustion and a stomach exhaustion thing, I think, right?
Yeah, I would say it gets worse in certain capacities. I think there's no way to alleviate the mental freight train battle that's coming your way. There's a certain point where no matter how much massaging or theragunning or thoughtful you are about your fuel, you are just going to hit some really brutal walls and mentally have to figure out how to push through them. I think that's probably a tough realization. I think even if you've got the best plan, as Mike Tyson's quote, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. I think that's it. And you have to go in with that kind of humility, knowing I'm going to do everything I can to take care of myself, but something is going to fail miserably. And you have to find a way to push through it, either through community or through some miracle spiritually, however you dig deep, you've got to. I remember, I want to say it was around 80 miles. I could barely walk. And I came to you and I'm like, I don't know if I can go out. I can barely walk. I was doing a walk run, but my right knee was in absolute shambles. And at that point, you've done 80 miles. You're really worried about doing potential permanent damage. That's the kind of thing where it's like my knee was screaming. And TJ said, why don't you go out and try and run one fast? Because at that point, I had done several yards at, a 11 to 12 minute pace, little bit of a walk run in there. And it was just the same pattern and the compounding. And, because you're running, we're not talking 10,000 steps. They're talking 100,000 plus steps. And so I went out and hammered I mean, I talked about the one I ran at 100K. This one felt like I was running sixes, and I think my average pace was like 8:45 to 9, maybe even in the low nines. But it worked out that issue. In basically about a yard and a half, I was on the other side of whatever had built up over that, 80 miles. But it was, if I don't run into TJ and he doesn't make that recommendation, I mean, it was a perfect opportunity to walk off, and you just never know. That's where the mental battles come in, when you're going to turn a corner or where the hill is, right? That you're going to crest over and fall down. So, yeah, long-winded answer there.
That's important, though. I think it highlights that you have to believe there's always another side. And I think people who run other races, you don't a lot of times get a chance to experience that. Right? If you hit the wall in the marathon, there's typically not another side, because it comes so late in the race. You're not. You have in a marathon, you have to embrace the wall. Like, all right, it's here, it's harder, it hurts, let's go. In these instances, and I'd be interested, I think I'd love to explore this a little bit further in terms of if you could talk about very specific. That was a great specific example. And the funny thing about that is that comes from my experience. That came from Ball State when I decided to start running, and that fixed the problem from, so that was where that came from. For me, it was an experience in a different race. And that speaks to your point earlier about having to figure this out. A lot of times it will take people multiple tries to get it. We've seen some certain people come out there and get, 4 yards farther every time they go out or whatnot. So
it's also a risk too. I don't want to sit here and condone, if you're in excruciating pain, to just plow through it, right? There is a risk. For me, when I started to get, when I hit 100, going into my last yard, I had a lot of chest tightness, which now you're dealing with organs. And I think in a prior podcast, I talked about the organ exhaustion. Like I had experienced before, the muscular and even the skeletal damage over a course of a marathon or a 50-miler that we had ran, but I had never experienced the organ exhaustion. And that's where I kind of drew the line. Certainly 100, that's kind of the milestone I was trying to get to. But when I started experiencing the chest tightness, and like you're dealing with your heart and other things that are clearly well beyond what they were designed to sustain, that's where you have to draw your own line. And potentially I could have got on the other side of that and been fine, but it was a line that I drew, and everyone's got to find that line based on the risks they're willing to take.
It seems like mixing stuff up was helpful, because if you're doing something 100,000 steps or whatever, did you switch shoes? What were some of the other tricks?
I did bring 2 pairs of shoes, and that was going to be a staple for me, but I got in the Mount to Coast P1s. I had started with the Hoka Skyflows, and I was going to go back and forth every couple of yards, but I got in the Mount to Coast P1s, and for whatever reason, those just worked like a dream for me, and I ran 80 miles, the remaining 80 miles. I think maybe there was one loop that I put the Skyflows back on when I was having the knee issues. But the P1s were just incredible. What was cool about those, and I would recommend for anyone that's considering a race like this, even if you're typically not someone who runs in a shoe that has some stability, it's not a bad idea to entertain it. Don't go out doing this right before the race. I know we're a week before the race. Don't go buy new shoes, but ankle stability starts to become a problem depending on how long you're going. When you get into 50, 60 miles, ankle stability becomes an issue. So the P1s have some stability in there, and that was huge for me. But variability and pace, to go back to your question, was huge, just to get a different impact. Shoes for sure, variability in fuel. I mean, all of those things were staples. And even variability in who you're running with in community, because there's some people that you can do a couple of yards with, and some people you could do 10 yards with. I know myself and Cameron Balzer and Phil Dodick, the 3 of us kind of locked in late and pulled each other through, the majority of the last 30, 35, 40 miles, and that was huge, having an anchor group like that.
Did you ever come across the point in time where you just felt like kind of just locked in, and sometimes you get in the flow and several hours went by, and was that, or is it just you're in so much pain that every step, after a certain point in time where it's just like you're mentally like, I got to keep going, or did you ever find the flow?
I did find the flow at a couple points, but it didn't last long. So I definitely found the flow. Like I remember when I had a chance to take a shower after 100K and change clothes, I felt like $1,000,000. I was like, I'm going to get to 100, no problem. And within 3 yards, when I hit like 72, I was back on the pain train. And once I hit kind of the mid 70s, I really never got out of it. It was just a grind all the way in from there. But there were points in there for sure. Had a little bit of a slow start. And then when, I ran with Kay a few yards, that kind of pulled me around for a handful of yards. Like you can get in and out maybe a handful of yards at a time. But in my experience, once I got into the 70s, personally, I had never run more than 50 miles. So part of that may be lack of experience. But once I got there, it was brutal.
I think it's important. One of the things that's been really unique, and Laz talks about this, we did the Chasing 100 documentary last year. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, go watch it. Voted one of the top 5 ultra documentaries from the last year. So that's kind of cool. At least
Wow.
ChatGPT thinks so. A really cool documentary that kind of showcases our attempt to cross that 100-mile threshold. But I think one of the things Laz talks about, and this, I guess we could talk a little bit about this element of the race as well, is that community and how it pulls you forward, and that people will do more for others than they will for themselves. Seeing Cameron last year, we didn't realize, and this is interesting, Cam in the running community is kind of this larger than life person. You run 11,000 miles in 9 months around the perimeter of the country by yourself. People think you can scale the Empire State Building, right? Like, what we didn't realize is how much something like that impacts you. And when we went down to talk to Laz, we spent like 8 hours with him as we were producing this film. One of the things Laz has talked about, and he has done a number of trans cons, which is running across America, walking across America. And he's like, none of us have that context. And he's like, when I finished those things, I was destroyed. He's like, I didn't want to look at a road. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to do anything for months. It just beat me to death. Cameron is very focused and has been for years on his nutrition. Well, when you're, again, around the outside of the perimeter, you don't have a whole lot of options. And he was eating McDonald's and gas station food and anything he could find because he needed to stay fueled for 40 miles a day. So him coming back a month after and doing that was so much more difficult than anybody could ever imagine. We looked at him and we're like, 40 miles a day, he'll run 300. He was a disaster. And I think not having anybody to commiserate with him or understand where he was probably really difficult to deal with. And so for him, he had talked about walking off in 23 that we wanted to hit 100. He was going to bury himself, not for Cam. What's 100 miles to that guy? But for you, for Phil, for anybody else that wanted to get there, his body started to shut down, and he now he will be coming back again this year, fresh, and has figured out his nutrition. So it'll be fun to see what he can do. Sleep is not Cam's thing, but I think the community aspect of it, finding those people, helping those people is going to get you through a lot of it. And then that also speaks to the fact that we are one of the few that has a team aspect to this race. I think that may drive you this year. Maybe we'll see. But it's cross-country style. So the top 5 runners contribute to an overall yard score. So it's not a relay, but everybody goes out and runs as many yards as they can. And the top 5 we had together. Fisher's Run Club took it home last year. They had a huge squad. We have a number of really competitive, really strong teams this year, especially with Jeff Walker signing up with Athletic Annex. Jeff was our winner last year and
Got
did
recruited.
130 miles. So Trent, Vic and the boys over at Annex got him to sign up, but Athletic Annex and Carmel Runner Club are running together, Fisher's Running Club, Body and Training, MTC, obviously the Do Hard Things and Tribal Training guys. So a lot of strong teams this year, but I don't think community can be understated, not only out there on the course, but also when it comes to the crews and the people that you see and the kids that are going to be around. Maybe that's something cool. Was there something that wasn't one of the things that would seem obvious from getting over a hurdle or getting through a wall perspective that you used? It was like, this is really cool that this is here. I like that this is here. This is helping me at this point outside of the things we've discussed, like something somebody wouldn't normally attribute to helping through one of those scenarios.
Not anything that I can think of.
Okay.
But I'd like to talk a little bit too about we talked about all walks of life participating in this, and you mentioned Jeff Walker, who won it last year. All walks of life can win this. There's we're so when we kind of shared that at the beginning is like, hey, all walks of life, you don't have to be able to run a 7-minute mile to come out and run. You can come out and run 1 or 2 or 3 yards or whatever. But there are, I'm not sure. I mean, Jeff obviously is in incredible shape. He ran his last yard after 130 miles in like a 7:30 pace or something incredible, which I can't even begin to tell you how impressive that is, because I know how hard it was for me to run the 9 whatever there late. But just talk about that and maybe get into a little bit of the broader races and what some of the times are that win some of these things, because that's pretty insane too. But I want to talk about, because this is so mental, because you only have to run a 12, 13-minute mile, if you are mentally strong, you can go really deep in this race without being in elite fitness shape.
Don't quit in the chair. I think that is extremely important. I remember year 1, and we had a guy, I can't remember his name. He was kind of what I want to call your kind of, I don't even know. I'll have to think of a way to classify this type of person, but they're like the ultra runner who is very, rough with their approach. You have your ultra runners that are very, okay, I'm training on trails and I'm doing these very specific things. This guy's like, oh yeah, I just run like 30 miles, every other week and Saturday mornings. And it just kind of around my neighborhood. And I really like the challenge of it and the tough, and he got, so no real like laid in stone training plan. He's not running 100-mile weeks. He's not some freak of nature physically. But I remember he made it to, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100K. And he made it, and then he was like, I think I'm done. I think, and he was actually having the conversation out loud with himself. Yeah, I can walk this. The guy ended up going 3 more yards, getting out there and walking. So a testament or to not quitting in the chair and giving yourself the chance to continue to go farther. I think that's what stops people is, it's covered in the movie, and it's this self-limiting. And, I was reading a book I mentioned to you last night. It's called Inner Excellence, wonderful book, but they talk a lot about that your body and your subconscious will align with what you believe about yourself. So that's why people play down to their competition. If you think you're a 7-minute miler and you go out and you start running 6:30s, your body's going to your subconscious is going to push you back towards that 7, because that's what it knows you believe you are. And I think that with this situation, that happens a lot. People are like, oh yeah, I'm a 50-mile guy. And that's what I believe about myself. Will you make it 54, 58 if you believe? But you might. But if you come in with that belief that that's who you are, you're going to be somewhere near that. You're more than likely not going to go 100. So giving yourself the opportunity to go 100 is big. And you're absolutely right. Anybody can take it. I mean, we saw, Phil's a great example, right? Phil doesn't train like an ultramarathoner, and Phil's never run farther than 50 miles. And when Phil ran that 50 miles, it was basically couched to 50 miles. He wasn't even working out.
That was one of the most impressive mental things I've ever seen.
He's very mentally strong, but he does a lot of Orange Theory, a lot of HIIT training type of stuff. He runs 20 miles a week maybe, which, is nothing to laugh at, but he buried himself last year. I think ran 86. So we see that, and people can do that. I've seen people come out that think they're going to do a yard and get 4. Now, there's the other side of this. And the other side of this is the extreme side. And there are professional, they may not make a living doing it, but I'll classify them as professional, because there is a whole nother level to this. And I don't want to say that, I want to give these athletes their due because they have pro athlete physiology. Jeff is a good example. Jeff ran, his personal best is 49 yards. So he's done 205 miles. He did that a couple of months ago.
Wow.
Now, as we talked about in the beginning with the race style, you have to have somebody that can go that far with you, right? So you can't, once the second to last person drops, you just can't keep going until you're done. So you have to have somebody go with you. Luckily for him, it was in Ohio Backyard Ultra, and he was running with Harvey Lewis, which Harvey's held the world record multiple times. He does it now. But to give you an idea, I've learned about Jeff's superpower by watching him on Strava. So right now in Indiana, you're going to get anywhere between a real feel of 90 and a real feel of 105 in a typical peak of the day, right? It's 80 some degrees to 90 some degrees with anywhere from 60 to 95% relative humidity. And a couple of weeks ago, I was watching, and Jeff went out mid-morning, so not crazy early, ran for 20 some miles at a 9:30 pace, at a real feel of 100, and his heart rate peaked at 120 something. And that's superhuman. I run 60 miles a week. I'll just give you an idea. I run 60 miles a week. I'm probably in 250 to 3 hour marathon shape. And in that weather, my heart rate can get into the 150s at a 9:30 pace. So there is an elite level of physiology there. There's also practicing sleeping. 99.9% of us cannot finish running 4 miles and go to bed for 10 minutes and wake up and have any meaningful impact. These guys have figured it out. The world record for the Backyard Ultra is over 5 days, or right at 5 days right now. So if you think about that, think about how you feel after a day of no sleep where you start to get nauseous, and think about 2 days of no sleep. If anybody's experienced that, I don't think I have. I came close to it last year. I'd love to experience it this year if we can push it into Monday. But these guys are going 3 and 4 days with no sleep while running the entire time. So you're talking 500 miles over a 5-day period with no more than, they typically, what it seems like, will run a handful of yards at a pace, kind of what you were talking about in that 50 to 53 minute range. And then they will run a faster one where they can get a little bit more done, maybe get a little bit more of a nap. So if you're able to instantly fall asleep and lock in these 10-minute naps, that adds up, right? That's 240, 230 minutes per day of sleep. So it's not insignificant, 3 to 4 hours. There are people out there genetically that are predisposed to being able to operate on 4 to 6 hours of sleep versus 8 to 10 like the rest of us. So if you have all of those things lining up for yourself, you can go that far. So there, but I do think anybody that has put a little bit into it and has a little bit of a base, you can't come out there having never run before and think you're going to speed walk, whatever. But if you've put in a little bit of effort, I will say this much, you can probably go 3 to 4 yards farther than you think you can. And in some instances, maybe double what you think you can.
Let's talk about sleep. Did you sleep at all for your 24 hours?
No.
So you weren't able to shut her down and get 10 or 15 there?
No, absolutely not.
And then I don't think we've talked about this at all, but putting on a race like this that can go for 2 or 3 days, your sleep, like what does this look like? What kind of crew do you have? How do you guys navigate, potentially a couple of days of a race going on?
Well, yeah. And first to touch on sleep, from what we've heard in talking to Laz, who's seen hundreds of these, the athletes that are going for like these extremes, they start out from the jump. Like, so most of us, we're going to show up, we're going to talk to people, we're going to meet people, we're going to be having, we're going to come back and meet crews and do the things. These guys, tent, rest. I'll talk to people when I'm out there on the yard, but from yard 1, I am off my feet, getting my rest, whatever. As it relates to us, we have an amazing team. It shifts every year because some of us run, so Todd ran last year. We had on site myself, John, Ricardo, Dakota. The kids will help in a lot of instances because there's a lot that's going on here.
Corey,
I mean, I could talk about Corey for days. Corey is probably, this doesn't happen without Corey.
Is he running this year or no?
No, he's not. Did he run?
Who is running on MTC?
2 years ago he ran.
2 years ago.
Who's
Christy's running this year. Dakota's running this year. I think that's it from the core operations side of things. Angie's running. Yeah. But Angie's run, I think every year. Yeah. Except for one when she was gone. Yeah, she's ran it. So Angie will run. So out of the core group of 8 to 10 of us, 3 people will be running this year. Christy was gone last year, and she ran the year before. But Corey is a major part of this race logistically. Those of you who are participating in the race, Corey's responsible for basically the entire runner experience in terms of picking up the packets and whatever. Unicorn Dan Corney's helping us logistically on site, kind of map things out in terms of where canopies go. But from a team perspective, John this year will be, he was kind of a catch-all. He will be handling all the food this year. So he's going to be focused there, and he'll have help in regards to, because now this year with Food for Purchase, we're going to have somebody helping him. It'll probably be one of your kids, actually, in terms of making sure people are taken care of. They get checked out. From a transportation perspective, Ricardo has normally run that with Wendy in the morning. So we do park off-site. We have people that will be driving minivans or small shuttles that will be taking runners from where they park and bringing them over to the campgrounds. That's a big point of contention. Not point of contention, but it's something that's discussed a lot, because it does get difficult. After you run 100 miles, the last thing you want to do is have somebody drive you back to your car. And then especially if you have to break down a campsite, then you got to bring your truck or whatever back, break your kit. It's a lot. But the reason we do that is because a lot of people show up with young kids and potentially even infants, where having a car right there is extremely important if somebody has an accident or if they need to go get something. So we want the friends, family, crew to be able to park on site. So Ricardo and Wendy typically handle that. Ricardo will be kind of a catch-all this year as well, helping with other things. So we have that going on. Tara will be on site. So this year, something really cool, really excited about is we're going to have merchandise for purchase. When you go to a lot of these youth sporting things, you can buy a sweatshirt and you can get it customized. The cool thing about our races is a variable race, right? So you can't pre-buy a Prairie shirt that has how many yards you finished. You can't do that, or other accomplishments you've made. So we're going to have those available for purchase on site. Like you spoke earlier, it gets cold there. Last year, we raided the gift shop at White River Campground and bought all of their sweatshirts. With the number of people here, we're going to be able to buy all their sweatshirts and even more because people are going to get cold. So Tara will be on site pressing merchandise, shirts, long sleeves, and hoodies for the crew, for the runners. So there's that element of it. We have...
Is all the purchase, just so everyone knows, is it credit card only? Like you're doing some type of Square?
Yes, it'll be credit card. I mean, we'll be able to accept cash, but we prefer credit card.
Yeah. Okay.
In that instance. So,
and you can use your phone and all that. It's all.
Great question. So that will be there. So we have those pieces of the puzzle. For me, my job is to engage and motivate and entertain and ring the bell. So I got kind of called to the carpet by Laz when we went down there. He's like, were you awake for every yard last year? And I'm like, no, I took a nap. I think between 104 and 112 or something. Like I missed one, maybe two. I'm going to try not to do that this year. The difficulty is we normally don't sleep Friday night either because we have to set up everything, and we might be done by midnight, and then we want to be up by 5 because some people will arrive pretty early in the morning to start setting up camp. So we want to be there and alert and ready. So, we will have that. In terms of things like awards, again, when you finish this race, we customize your awards. So the kids have run that in the past. The Hubbard girls and Kennedy, my daughter, where they are wood burning in the yards you finished on that. Well, the Hubbards are running this year, and we have 50 more people. So potentially
I'm bringing all 4 kids.
Tapping more of your kids to help do the wood burning. So Kennedy's running that element of it. So as you can see, I mean, it's a ton. Corey is on site, also helping people secure their campgrounds and making sure that they're in the right spaces, because this year will be the first year that we have to be very thoughtful about it. Like an extra foot is going to matter. So we're going to have to really map out, this is where your canopy goes, and be conscious of how we do that so that the right people, right now it doesn't look like anybody's going to have more than a 30-second walk to the corral, which is cool. But he'll be doing that. So there's going to be a ton. There's going to be, I'm sure, more pop up as the day goes on. One of the big things that Todd is going to be doing, and what a major piece of this puzzle, is the data. So we do have a giant TV that sits in the pavilion, which you guys built a Power BI dashboard for it last year. We'll probably talk about it going forward. We may need a bigger screen than we had last year, but it was really cool as it showed the team totals and different, like what yard we were on and different things there. So this year, the idea would be, we talked about some cool things last year, having photos for all the runners and just having this like hub where you can see how many people are left, how many people dropped on the last yard, how many yards we're at, what the team scores look like, who just dropped. So it's going to be a ton.
Are there photographers out there, like, in those races, the marathon photo or whatever, where people can buy images? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So last year we didn't. This year we have the king himself, Timmy Howard, coming out to take photos. Timmy did the full mo photos and they were phenomenal. I know you both saw them. He's got some other things that he's committed to, but the great thing is we'll be there for 2 days. So, he can show up at noon and miss a couple of yards and still get a lot of great photos. And then of course, John will be out capturing another film this year. We are going to do this will be probably the last film we do. It's IMG sponsored film. So thank you guys for that. We're super stoked, to have that done. That's always a big concern for us, is getting this out there. But this year we have 5 really strong females that we think can eclipse last year's 100-mile goal and potentially go farther, and some that could get close to winning. So we're going to focus on their journeys. A lot of them have really gone above and beyond this year with, 3 of the ladies made their own shirts, which I'm super stoked about for this race as they progress. We have a couple of them. One of them in particular, I mentioned Tammy earlier, is at the Prairie every single day. She had told me she's a road runner. She hated trails. Last year, she was one of the people that looked forward to that night yard. And so she's gotten out there every day and run the trail and actually kind of fallen in love with that. So we'll focus on her and Sarah and Angela and Christy and Gracie. And I think those 5 ladies will make for a really interesting story. And then of course we'll cover the younger girls and see how they progressed. Last year, the 2 youngest ran 30 miles and they want to see if they can go 10 yards this year. So that'll be fun to watch.
Talk about your vision for this race. So it's come a long way in 4 years. It's pretty much at capacity from a registrant perspective. You guys have done an incredible job with the experience and the food and all the things that you're even talking about adding this year. What sort of a vision are you there? Do you feel like, and it's just a matter of kind of fine tuning? Do you have a bigger vision for this longer term outside of just trying to continue to further the overall number of yards?
I think we collectively want this to be a premier race in the United States. One thing that has always stuck with me, recently, and we've mentioned it in prior podcasts, is the lack of runner experience today. There are experiences that are for the masses, like themes, color runs, mud runs, things like that. But when it comes to harder races, it's just not, from my perspective, harder races, and that can mean even a half marathon and further. I think certain people, especially when these get really corporatized, have lost the passion for the race and have turned it into a money-making thing. This year, fingers crossed, will be our last year in the red, we hope. But what we want to do is we want to create the most amazing experience pre-race, on-site, post-race. So we want you to, I'll give a little bit of it away. I'm sorry, Corey, you're going to kill me. But like an example is for Pack-A-Pickup this year, we will have a red carpet, which I think is indicative of what you will get. Like you're going to get your packet this year and it's going to be, oh my goodness, this is so much more than the plastic drawstring bag that I get with 18 postcards, my bib, and a t-shirt in it. That is a big piece of the vision when you get on site again, all of this food, trying to think of everything. I think this year we're working on it. Athletic Annex, they're there running as a team. Gareth, Jake, all of the people we know over there, I could list them for days, have been phenomenal partners. Lynn, knowing everybody that works at Annex, this would probably take 10 minutes, so I'm not going to list everybody off, but we're thinking about them having a shop on site. So if you do forget Body Glide, it's there for purchase. If you do need fuel, like if they sell Untapped or Morton or whatever, and it's something that you use, they could potentially have there for purchase. So we'll have that there. That's a big piece of it. Hamilton County Parks has been very accommodating. One of the things we'd like to do, we'll be talking with them about this over the coming weeks after the race, is securing a permit and or pass more often than just in a year. Right now, it's a yearly thing. So every year we have to resubmit for this. So we'd like to go out and maybe help do trail work and keep the trail in shape in turn for maybe a 2-year permit or something like that. We've been exploring the opportunity to expand this a little bit in terms of people. As you said, it's very, very tight this year. We always end up having more people run than we originally anticipated. We go out on a regular basis to ensure that we can facilitate that. But we did notice that there is an area that they've given us every year that we haven't used. And it's just south of this playground on site. And most of you won't know what I'm talking about because you're not super familiar with the footprint. But if we're able to adjust the corral a little bit, I think we can max this race out at 300. There's a place that is, this space is equally as large as the pavilion green space. So I think getting it to 300, which I think is about as big as we could possibly get it because of the logistics with parking and then on-site parking and things like that. And that would result in 500 to 600 people being there day of. And then just making sure that the runner experience, not only from a food and sustenance and packet pickup and day of, but we also want to add some ambiance to it. So, when the lights go down at Prairie, all the fire comes up and doing more of that. We've got some more ideas in terms of lighting the out and back loop. Last year we did it with LED lights. Unfortunately, we didn't leave them out in the sun enough prior. So this year we're going to do a little bit more there, but we have some ideas for fixtures out on that part of it. Corey, if Corey was allowed to run wild with this race would cost us $100,000. So there will be some really new, cool things that will be there this year and then again next year. So good thing we got a trailer for the club this year so that we can haul all this stuff around because it's getting to be quite a bit.
So just some last things logistically. Most people come in the night before, but some come in the day of. When does the race actually start?
8 a.m. Saturday morning.
8 a.m. Saturday morning.
We do our last pickup from the parking lot at 7:30. Okay. So we want to make sure that everybody can get back and have 15, 20 minutes to kind of get their head in, get in the corral. Again, like I said earlier, if you're not in the corral by the time the bell rings, you're done. And I would hate for that to happen to somebody before they've run their first yard.
Wow. Okay. Well, is there any other parting thoughts, or that's a lot of great information about the race? Anything else you guys want to add?
I'd like to ask you right before we go how you're feeling, what your thoughts are, what you're looking forward to, what you're not looking forward to, because, you haven't done an ultra in a while and, since full mow, right? So it's been a couple of months, but you haven't gone, farther than 50 miles since 2020. So kind of where's your head?
Yeah. I really trained for the full mow.
Yes, you did.
I got, I think in the early podcast we talked about, I worked my way up where I was doing 55, 60 miles a week. Really committed to that. The summers are really tough for me, just logistically with family and commitment. So I do not feel as prepared as I was going into the full mow where I beat probably my top goal by almost 30 minutes. So it's really going to be interesting. I'm not setting a number because I think that once you hit that, you mentally shut down. I am going to be interested. Like I can run 4 miles and the running and walking, it's going to be interesting to see how far I can mentally push it. So I'm not showing up to get beat by your daughter. So I'll put that out there. You'll have to wheelchair me off the course, but knowing she could easily go for 10, just given her abilities, it's going to require me to kind of dive in. So I'd love to make it to the night. It's just I'm not as confident in the work I put in. Hearing you guys talk about food, I haven't really done any food. I kind of know what I think can work. So this first year I could surprise myself. It could be a complete bust if my food's off. So, I do have mentally kind of some places that I want to push through, and it's going to be interesting to see mentally how tough I can go. So I am looking forward to the experience. I was pleasantly surprised the full mow. What a cool experience that was, and I'm this small kind of intimate group of people and like the relational stuff. Like I love that stuff. So I'm excited to get out there, talk it up with new friends, old friends, have really good, deep conversations. And I'm hoping I find a couple of people that are, I just lock in with and we go for a long time. So
I'm excited. I'm really, ready to get it going again. I think we have a couple people that are coming out. I think Keely will be there this year, and she's run every single one of these. So I'm stoked to have her. I think she might be the only person. Angie may have done them all, but stoked to have those people that have been out there every year and that have seen this experience grow, and then hope that the people that are coming out this year grow it with us in the future. So stoked.
It's going to be great.
Well, if that doesn't get you excited about Prairie on Fire, I don't know what will. It is one of the best races from what these guys are saying, and just what I heard today. I'm really excited and looking forward to it next week. So, going to be a great experience. There'll be some post dialogue, I'm sure, regarding the event, but it also seems like it sells out quickly. So, if this is something on your list for 2026, when do you open up registration for the following year?
So typically what we'll do is we'll premiere the film in January at one of the Athletic Annex locations. Last year we had like 100 people show up for the premiere. That is when registration begins. So if you show up to the premiere, last year we sold out in 6 weeks. Even if we raise the capacity, we sold out in 6 weeks, and within 2 months of that had a wait list of 50. So that was 200 people interested in it inside of a 2-month period. So that's when we will start registration, and then we'll open up to the public either the day after or the day after that. So we'll take names and numbers and stuff there.
Can they go on your website and register for like a newsletter to get notified? Like how does that work?
Go to meshtc.com and you can find all the information about the site there, or about both of our races there. We will be establishing a newsletter next year, so they can sign up for that and get information and maybe some early access. And then all the races are hosted on Ultra Sign Up. So you can go to ultrasignup.com and search up for Prairie on Fire and or Full Mo. But meshtc.com is kind of your hub for everything us.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.